Well, that's perfect to continue on with Tom, who's absolutely passionate about soil and worms and fungi and compost. So, Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Nicola. Hello, everyone. Thank you, guys. That was awesome. Really cool to hear your story, Ed and Vicky and Andrew. Really awesome presentations. Okay. So hello, everyone. My name's Tom. I I run a brewery called Old Tree, which is a sort of social enterprise that started by getting lots of experience in a woodland and sort of having my worldview completely changed. This was like 10, 12 years ago, sort of finding out that trees are basically made of the air, and, you know, the microbes on the trees are actually what's responsible for rainfall and all of this stuff that just made you realize you know nothing and that you've got everything to learn. And we ended up like starting a kombucha brewery as a sort of way to fund that kind of co-learning and this visiting these woodlands, realizing the woodlands are like actually desperately in need of human interaction again. You know, the coppice is all degraded and there aren't any wolves, and the deer are like eating all of the new generation. It felt like urgent that we do something about that, but we couldn't afford to give all our time for free, so we thought, well, we'll start a brewery to fundraise for that. 10 years later, it's turned out it's actually harder than you think starting a brewery to fundraise for ecological restoration, and it's not getting any easier. But this was my original inspiration in Brighton, this Lewis Road community garden. A friend of mine put up that banner, and we just moved in and moved plants and compost in and just transformed this space into a community centre. A few years later, I did that on a bigger scale, and that's when I discovered the sort of power of the biology in compost, because I'd always thought of compost as like a substrate that plant roots just grow in, and then you added stuff and they grew. But I realized, like with the steaming compost that we got from this compost tumbler I bought in, that actually there was something going on with the biology. So yeah, it sort of started this compost revolution in my mind and the mind of like others, and I came to sort of study it, and I studied with a few people. Elaine Ingham's one of them, but like another one was Jairo Restrepo, who teaches beautifully about like the power of biofertilizers and how we can just like ferment these minerals. You know, he makes fertilizers out of rock dust, and it's so disruptive because it totally just like throws the narrative of conventional and chemical farming out of the window. He says we're all part of a mineral spiral, and the function of microbiology is to allow for the unions between minerals and organic matter. And I love this realization that we are all minerals from the earth, which is essentially a rock, and then miracle processes happen, and there was water and the sunlight and the chlorophyll and the plants. But you know, there was a time when the earth was dominated by mushrooms. I was reminded recently, and I really think that we need to reverse this succession that industrial agriculture has taken, which is trying to turn the earth back into a rock and reduce the biodiversity. And we need to cultivate this biodiversity, and the place we need to start that is on a microbial level. And I think fungi are our greatest partners. This is a picture I took only a day ago. This is a field really near me in Lewis that's just been glyphosated, and I haven't like been a farmer yet. I've just done like community garden scale growing, but to me, glyphosate feels wrong, and learning about how it disrupts the sugarcane pathway in plants means that it cannot be good for fungi, because you cannot separate plants and fungi. So I do not think glyphosate, I think it should be banned, and I'd be interested to talk to learn more about it. But there's the one thing that gives me hope is that we can, the biology exists to break down glyphosate and help restore living soil, and in that regard, and we can all cultivate that in compost that we can all make where we live and work. So yeah, the soil carbon sponge, this is how I love to think about soil. Carbon is like the spring in the soil that makes it alive, that makes it into a sponge that can hold the water and can store the carbon. And the fact is, I learned from a TED talk by Walter Jenne that 1 gram of carbon in the soil stores 8 grams of water. And obviously most of the carbon in the world is stored in the soil, or should be stored in the soil. And that's where we can all put it back with proper application of compost. Now, Elaine Ingham is the person who has taught that to the most people in the world right now. The Soil Food web course teaches you how to make complete compost, which I'm going to define in the next slides, but also apply it to land. And it's It's deeply radical. I love these quotes. Only those who see the impossible, who see the invisible, can do the impossible. And we didn't know what we were doing because we didn't know what we were undoing. You know, this circular web of life that underpins all other webs of life, from organisms, you know, truthfully, most people on the earth couldn't really name, let alone tell you their role and function. And it's fair enough, we can't see them. Like, it's only the microscope work of the last 30 years that Elaine's done and now is now teaching everyone, that is making this accessible. So this is what healthy soil looks like under a microscope, and that's what dirt looks like. Dirt is soil that's been devoided of life through the wrong kind of grazing or through chemical applications, and dirt is why we see runoff on our fields. What we can do is cultivate fungi that has such ridiculously high biology. All of these creatures, this is Matt Power's illustration of it, beautiful, beautiful work. He's doing some amazing work. He's just published regenerative soil microscopy as well. I'd really recommend checking it out. Yeah, this is essentially the important thing about the soil food web, I think, is that it gives us a tool to measure the fungal to bacterial ratio. So I'm against industrial compost making because it destroys fungi. It doesn't allow for the maturation of fungi. This is why we need fungi. This is like the complete compost is about 1:1, 1 part fungi to 1 part bacteria. And as you can see, when you have the normal ratio, which is like mostly bacteria, that's what happens when soil's been tilled, that's what happens when soil's been glyphosated, you have a soil which is perfect to grow weeds. When you get the fungi up, which you do by the applications of good compost and mulch and biology, you can start to grow the kind of crops that human civilization depends on. My friend Perry runs a business doing these soil testing things now. He did the full soil food web consultancy thing, and he does these reports to me. So this report on the left, I took this year. This is a field that a local farm are turning into a market garden. It's typical of most soils. And as you can see from these things, the fungi is nothing. The protozoa that eat all the bacteria, very little. Nematodes, virtually none. The only thing it's got in it is bacteria. This is some 3-month-old compost that I made in compost tumblers. And that compost, you can see, has got 240,000 protozoas per gram. It's got really high level of nematodes for only 3 months. To have 1,400 of those little nematode worms per gram, they're all eating 10,000 bacteria a day, and that's what's doing all the nutrient cycling. So basically, this compost is the perfect thing to add to this soil, which only has bacteria, because then you get the nutrient cycling and you get to work with all of this beneficial biology. So yeah, Perry provides these services, and that's kind of, I think the most important thing is, like, we spend so much time making compost and so much energy making compost, and there's so much energy gardening and weeding, and it's all could be avoided if we just cultivated fungi instead of bacteria. So one of these early inspirations for me was learning about the terra preta in the Amazon and how they basically created, they changed their soil completely and they changed their climate, and I was inspired ever since I learned about this. Like this is also like the food forest garden inspiration, you know, like they by composting in the ground, and they were actually having kind of recreational gatherings because these pits of black man-made soil are infused with human pottery. Again, this has only been discovered in the last 30 years by a different like sort of perspective on soil ecology. So yeah, adding biochar to compost is something that I'm deeply passionate about now. I recently hosted an event with some speakers who also use Jura compost tumblers to make high biology compost, and they are funded kind of by a company that does engineering to manufacture localized charcoal producing systems. Charcoal is such a great habitat for microorganisms, and I think that when we're looking at how to restore the biology to fields, like you were saying, Andrew, the rain events can be, you know, that you could wash away all that biology like quite easily if it was in the wrong kind of form. Or like, so biochar, I know, is such a good habitat for those microbes, and I think could help build up soil carbon a lot quicker. So this is one of my I consider like the greatest like things that I've installed with Old Tree Soil, the composting business, which has only been going since lockdown. It's a community garden compost station that just really effectively runs itself, because it's got these gardeners that really value the compost, and it's got local people that really value having somewhere to put their food waste. And it's this like loved green space that gets used all the time, and people pay, and it makes a small amount of money to pay for our expenses of keeping it supplied. But it's just the sort of nice circular economy. I think we could have compost stations like this everywhere. They don't have to be with Joras. I supply these, but they could be with compost with Rydans and bigger things. I mean, there are other ways of doing it, and that's what I want to share, is all the ways that are making compost, and what is the best way we can utilize all these resources. And that's why I'm running this mycelium composting network. These are some of the events that I've done on it in the past 6 months, and these have been really awesome. It's like shining a light on people that are absolutely trailblazing in their fields, literally. And like, so there's biotrail one recently. Mary just is a mycologist, it's a mycologist, and she had an amazing presentation about soil carbon and a complete paradigm shift. And then Josh Sparks, I'd really recommend checking out his natural farming philosophy. Looking to do a bigger event with him next year, but he's doing some incredible work with natural farming inspired by the Japanese approach. So sort of bringing all this together and building a community where all of this knowledge can be preserved. So I've made like we've got it's a mighty network. It's a type of like app which has got different spaces. So there's like biochar, mycology, regenerative natural farming, funding for local composting, a space for people, everyone making complete compost with the compost tumblers together. You get like big discounts on Bokashi, big discounts on the compost tumblers by signing up. It's a paid space to create a resource for the future, but I'm personally like I'm offering like sponsored places for farmers and growers, because it's all about this idea that we could operate like fungi and recycle locally, and then we could actually make this complete compost, which is so valuable. By the way, it's the most farmers in America in the Soil Food Web School, they're teaching people how to use compost that's worth £1,000 a ton, and you only need 1 ton per acre to completely restore the biology, which then does the work for you, working with the plants and the cover crops to build deeper soils. And cover crops actually do way more to sequester carbon, I found out, than applying composts. They do twice as much per year. So because they're just turning sunlight into carbon, aren't they? So yeah, there's a whole world sort of school that's being created here, and I'd love it if you would all participate, because everyone that does subscribe enables me to give it to like a farmer or a student or someone that wouldn't be able to subscribe for free, and we can make it more equal, equitable, and have complete compost for everyone. Thank you.